Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. My name is Jean Roberts and I am president of the League of Women Voters of Appleton. We are sitting or standing on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of Indigenous peoples. Here where I sit and stand, these are the homelands of the Menominee people. There are 10 other federally recognized Native American sovereign nations in Wisconsin, as well as the brother town that is not yet recognized. Today, we will honor the Oneida Nation. The Wisconsin Oneida are one of the 3 New York tribes. Many of their relatives still live there, as they are known as the New York Oneida. The Oneida are the people of the Standing Stone. Their journey to Wisconsin was arduous, yet their determination to live in harmony with all other beings in the area helped them survive and thrive. We acknowledge their love of the land, which they now call home. By acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional land of these sovereign nations, we honor with gratitude the land itself and all of the winged, 2-legged, 4-legged, many-legged, and the water peoples who have stewarded the land and water throughout the generation and for generations to come. Thank you all, and thank you for your interest in this forum and your support of the Democratic Partisan Candidate Forum for voters to get to hear what the candidates have to say. It is not a campaign event and not a debate. We stand for civil discourse. The candidates understand that no candidate information is allowed to be displayed during this event. This Zoom forum is being recorded and will be made available on both 411.org, the League's Webby Award-winning website, and the League of Women Voters of Appleton website. It is also being live streamed on Facebook. We ask all those watching this forum to refrain from making any partisan comments on the League of Women Voters Facebook page. Any partisan comments will be deleted to conform with the League of Women Voters nonpartisan policy. Any questions sent to the League's email will be sent to the candidates and their answers will be added to the candidate voter guide. The League of Women Voters of Appleton owns the copyright to any audio or visual recording to these events. Unauthorized videotaping falls under the rules of the FCC, which requires that a forum must not be edited and must be broadcast in its entirety, either live or reasonably soon after it takes place. In addition, the League of Women Voters of Appleton candidate forums must not be referenced as a source in any campaign materials. While there is not a sign language interpreter, there will be closed captioning available on the YouTube video, which will be available through the League of Women Voters website. In addition, the candidate forum is available in other languages besides English on YouTube. Prior to tonight's forum, residents were invited to submit questions to the League email. Some of those questions will be heard tonight. These questions have been sorted before they were sent forward. This was not to eliminate questions, but rather to group them into like categories so that we have the opportunity to ask as many questions as needed to cover a variety of topics. We have a timekeeper. The League has always found this process to be a good means to keep us on track and moving along. It is not meant to cut people off or diminish the importance of a response, but simply to use our time wisely. We trust that our local Wisconsin candidates will respect these constraints. And finally, we would like to acknowledge the candidates, Kyla Loebner and Sherry S. Hartzheim. We are grateful and thank them for their willingness to run for office and serve their community. Jacqueline Klimaszewski is Director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters. Jacqueline has planned and organized this forum. She will be presenting the questions to the candidates. Jackie?
Thank you, Jean. Let me add my gratitude to the candidates for your time this evening to share your viewpoints with our voters. And thanks to all the viewers out there for caring enough to be informed when you cast your ballots in the election on April 6th. I have the pleasure to moderate this forum tonight, and I have questions as Jean described. And I've been getting them all week long. So we keep adjusting the question list as we go. All questions submitted, asked and unasked, will be sent electronically to the candidates. Their written responses will be on the league website for you to view and use when you're deciding your vote. For each question, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond, monitored by our timekeeper, Julie, with the exception of the first, which will be 2 minutes. After that, they will all be 1.5 minutes. We will alternate which candidate replies to the questions so that they both have a chance to be first and last. And we are starting in the order that they are on the ballot. So we will start with candidate Lobner first and then go to candidate Hartzheim. So the first 2 minutes, the candidates will have an opportunity to introduce themselves, provide their background and their interest in the city council seat, District 13. Mr. Lobner?
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you as well to the League for both hosting this event and making it possible for so many more people to see it by making it available online. I very much appreciate that and hope that's a thing we'll consider continuing even as things go back to normal in the years ahead. My name is Kyle Lobner, and for the last 8 years, I've been the Alderman representing District 13 for the City of Appleton. For 5 of those years, I've been chairman of the Safety and Licensing Committee. For the last year, I've been chairman of the Finance Committee, and for the last 2 years, I've been the Appleton Common Council president. And I list off those things not to brag, but rather because I think they're important. I think as we enter a time where our community faces really an unprecedented crisis, and the tail end of it, it's incredibly important that we have folks who are experienced in our council positions, working on making decisions that will have a long tail for the future of our community. Our Common Council and our city have seen a lot of turnover in recent years. Within the last 2 years, the mayor, the city attorney, and 9 of the 15 members of our Common Council have all turned over. And so I think during this time, and as we navigate, again, the challenges that we face this year, it's increasingly important that we keep some folks who have experience on council and some folks who have established an understanding of what it is that we do and what we're trying to accomplish going forward. So I thank you again for having me tonight, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Candidate Hartzheim.
Many thanks to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to give you a little bit of information about myself and about my desire to serve the neighbors of District 13. My name is Sherry S. Hartzheim, and I have lived in Appleton for nearly 20 years. I'm a newly retired small business owner and manager, and since the mid-1990s, I've managed all sorts of businesses and highly technical programs. Most notably, I was vice president and majority owner of Hartzheim Engineering and Overend Technologies, small manufacturing business here in Appleton. My now 93-year-old father has always been my inspiration to serve. In my younger days growing up in the village of Hilbert, my dad put in countless hours as a school board member, a village board member, and even served one term as village president. So I grew up understanding that if I were able, I was to put as much of myself into service to my neighbors as possible. Years ago, I served as president of the City of Sheboygan's Zoning Board of Appeals and am currently the treasurer on the board of directors for Community Action for a Healthy Living here in the Fox Cities. When I began thinking about running for alderman, I couldn't help but think about how much local government is like running a business. Planning ahead, budgeting, closely watching the bottom line, being good stewards of investors' dollars, making cooperative decisions based on what's best for all involved. Those are all skills of a business manager and of a common council member. So I think that I can offer those skills to the city of Appleton. My initials, SSH, remind me of the first step of service that my dad instilled in me. I will listen before fervently speaking up in the best interest of my neighbors on District 13. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you. And we will start with candidate Hartzheim and then go to candidate Lobner. Now, library, right? We've got questions. I've got 2 questions, and I've divided this up so that you would have 1.5 minutes for each of these. The second one will deal with dollars. This one deals with the value of a library. So what is the value of a library to a community, and who does it serve?
Well, I have a lot of strong feelings about a library. I grew up in a small town and those sorts of things were very important. Having access to learning to books was very important in the little village of Hilbert. So I see the value here. In fact, I brought my daughter to the library downtown many, many times when she was much younger. She's 13 now, so she doesn't care about a library any longer. But, but I still see the importance of it. I feel like it's the cornerstone of a healthy community. The constituents want us to balance what is needed to make that, to keep it a quality library, and balance that with the things that we can't afford to make that happen.
Okay, Candidate Loebner.
Thank you. You know, a library, I was glad to hear the word cornerstone in there because a library really is the cornerstone of a healthy community. It's a place where a lot of folks can gather, and it's really the only place in our community where anyone can gather, regardless of whether they're coming to spend money or regardless of their age, regardless of their background. It's a place where all are welcome. Whether it's for children's programs, whether it's for folks who are new to our community and maybe even new to our country, you know, whether it's for teen programs or adult programming, the library is a critical service to our community. And it's also a place where people access technology increasingly, which has been a need that we've had to work to address over the years. And I hope we can address someday with a new library. In fact, I hope we can address that someday soon. And so the library really is a place for everybody. And I hope that as the years go by, we will build an Appleton Public Library that everyone can be proud of and that everyone can visit.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Candidate Loebner, on this one. According to an article in the Post-Crescent, the city has budgeted $2.4 million this year for library design services. And it has also identified that $12 million will be needed in 2022 and again in 2023 for construction. Do you support this level of expenditure for library construction? And please explain why or why not.
I do, and I did last fall when it was a part of the City of Appleton budget, and I did just yesterday when the Finance Committee recommended hiring an architect to start that process. As I mentioned before, the library is a cornerstone of our community, but our facility, as it was built right now, is not built to meet the needs of a modern library, and it's not built to have the flexibility necessary to meet the needs of a future library. And so I am excited to support a new project to either renovate or rebuild the existing public library. I'm extremely excited about the architect that came out of the recommendation process. This is an item where this is a clear expectation of our constituents. It's an expectation that a community like Appleton will have a great public library. Not just a warehouse for books, but a vibrant location, whether it's for people who are using technology, people to bring their children, people to attend adult programming, people to attend events like this forum in previous years. And so I'm really excited about the possibility of working in the years ahead to get this complete. And I think we're closer to doing it than we ever have been during my 8 years on council.
Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim.
I agree. It is a valuable asset to our community. And I see that there is a great need for change in the existing library. The architect that was chosen, I would like to quote one of their statements. It says, "We will give serious consideration to the possibility of adaptively reusing the existing structure and the benefits offered versus creating an entirely new building. Our focus is finding creative, cost-effective, project-specific solutions that respond to your needs." The last word, I believe, is the key here. I believe that we need to build a library or focus on rebuilding the library that we have to satisfy our needs, not our wants. Nina built a robust library for $6 million 20 years ago. Surely $26.4 million is not perhaps necessary to build a vibrant library community in the city of Appleton. I still support a vibrant library community and hope that we can do that under the $26.4 million mark that is currently budgeted.
Okay, Candidate Hartzheim, we'll start with you. If elected, will you support municipal efforts to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 under existing laws as supported by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities?
Well, if it's not the library, it's COVID-19. That's all we're talking about. Of course, I believe that community health is of the greatest importance. I believe that the city has done a great job in supporting vaccinations. I think that it is for the city to do those sorts of things. And I think that that as a city, we should support public education and information regarding COVID-19. But outside that, I think we need to be careful about perhaps government overstep. I think we need to balance that with personal liberties. And honestly, I do not believe that the city should take excess restrictive steps beyond what the state and federal government have already taken in that regard.
Candidate Loebner?
Thank you. One of the biggest roles of local government, in fact, possibly the biggest role of local government, is promoting public safety. And community health is public safety. When we are dealing with an active pandemic, we are talking about something that is right within the wheelhouse of local government. As the spouse of a healthcare worker, we're a very pro-science household around here. And so we are strongly in favor of efforts to reduce the spread of COVID-19. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest narratives of the year or two ahead, is trying to figure out how we can safely reopen as a community, continuing to maximize efforts to get as many people vaccinated as we can. But it's an effort that has to be done with safety as the highest priority. And so, in the months ahead, one of the blessings that we have as a city government is we have a wealth of experts in our health department and beyond. We need to make sure we're listening to them. We need to make sure we're following their advice, and we need to make sure that we are reopening safely instead of just bowing to pressure to get the doors open again.
Candidate Loebner, we'll start with you for this question. How much time do you anticipate spending on the position, and how do you intend to keep constituents informed about city issues and your participation?
The time commitment for this job really varies week to week and month to month. During budget season, the time commitment is very high. The city of Appleton's budget for this year was 660 pages long. We receive it about a month before we vote on it. And so for that month, being an alderman could be pretty close to being a full-time job, conducting budget reviews, talking to directors, making sure you understand what's in the budget and can communicate it to folks. Other times of year, it varies depending on what's on the schedule. I imagine with the library coming up again, we'll be talking about it a lot in the weeks ahead, and it will probably take a little more time than it has before. In terms of keeping people informed, this was one of the things that I started running for alderman with a goal to do. When I decided to run in 2012, I launched a campaign blog to keep people informed about issues facing the city, votes that were coming up that week. I publish it pretty close to every week. I've published it over 260 times now in the 8 years that I've been on council, to make sure people know about what's coming up, how it affects them, and where I plan to vote on it. And so, I share that on neighborhood Facebook pages, on my own page, and on Nextdoor, in an effort to keep people informed, because I really think the effort to get people involved in the process and the effort to help people understand what we're doing really depends upon our ability to be excellent communicators. And I think that's one of the biggest skills I bring to the table.
Candidate Hartzheim.
Thank you. I am pleased to say that I very often read Mr. Loebner's blog posts and all his posts on Facebook, etc. And I would intend to include and continue those efforts should I be elected. As far as time commitment, I am newly retired, and I was a business owner and manager, so I worked not just a 40-hour week. So I'm fully prepared to put in as much time as possible to do whatever it takes to serve District 13 in the city of Appleton in this position. I also have the upper hand. I have had many experiences with budgets and budgeting, and I am also a very good communicator. In fact, my degree from UW-Milwaukee is in mass communications. So I am able to do those same sorts of things. So I feel that I will be able to keep my ears open and also be a good communicator to tell folks in District 13 and the rest of the city what's going on and in Common Council, and help to field their questions in that regard.
Okay, we'll start with Candidate Hartzheim for the next question that deals with housing. Will you support ordinances and or other measures, including updating the comprehensive plan to ensure affordability in housing in Appleton? And then there's a second part of concern about this city controlling the tearing down of affordable housing. Should there be some kind of a requirement for replacing affordable housing when it is demolished?
The city of Appleton has had a Appleton Housing Authority since 1967, and it was supported by HUD dollars and city tax dollars. So I think that we've done a lot as a city to try to support affordable housing in the city. The Community and Economic Development Department has as one of their tenets that they will support improvements on housing stock. So I think that we have efforts in place and that we should very much support them. We also have vouchers, block grants, accessory dwelling units was also brought up in January by the Common Council. So all of those things are efforts to create or help to support affordable housing in the city of Appleton. And I think all those sorts of options that should be utilized without any significant charge to our taxpayers for that sort of thing. As far as tearing down, replacement, that sort of thing for housing, I believe that the market should dictate whether houses are rebuilt. Instead of policy on the city level, I think that that should be a market force.
Candidate Loebner?
Thank you. One correction, the Appleton Housing Authority is not supported by tax dollars from the city of Appleton. It was founded by an Appleton ordinance, but it is run independently from the city of Appleton. Aside from sharing a healthcare provider, we do not actually provide any tax dollars to them, although some of our community development block grant money does pass through the city of Appleton to the Appleton Housing Authority. Affordable housing has been a real challenge to try to pin down over my tenure on council. I know it's a thing we are aware of. I know it's a thing we talk about often because homelessness is a real problem in our community, and it's growing. At least in part due to the fact that Appleton is a magnet city for folks who are experiencing homelessness in other communities. And so they often end up in Appleton as well. I was pleased to see that resolution come forward about accessory dwelling units. I think that will give us an opportunity to explore some possibilities to make affordable housing available for more people. We have also had several developments that have come through for city supports that include some affordable housing. But the challenge is great, and the solutions that we have right now are relatively small. I'm looking forward to hopefully more opportunities to work with neighboring communities to make sure that providing affordable housing isn't just Appleton's concern, that it's a thing we're attacking as a region, because homelessness in other communities frequently leads to homelessness in Appleton. And I'm not aware of many situations in recent years where the city has torn down affordable housing, but I think we are certainly aware of the need to put more on the tax rolls, regardless of whether we're tearing it down or not.
Thank you. We'll start with candidate Loebner. What are your thoughts for dealing with the racial disparity in Appleton housing, policing, and opportunities generally?
You know, the first thing that we need to do is make sure people feel like they're being heard and make sure people are being heard, not just that they feel like they're being heard. And that's been a longstanding process for us, trying to make sure that we are providing open forums where people can come and talk to us about what they're experiencing, trying to make sure that our relationships with organizations around the community, I'm thinking of organizations like the Hmong American Partnership, for example, are comfortable reaching out to us. And one of the things that we have going for us as a community is that we have a really great relationship with some of those organizations where we are hearing from them when they experience concerns, taking the steps that we can to address it. Specifically in regards to policing, I'm very familiar with this issue as a longtime chair of the Safety and Licensing Committee. I'm really proud of the work the police department has done to both listen to the community and to take steps kind of ahead of community outreach for them, to make sure that our police are doing the best they can to operate safely in our community. That doesn't mean we're perfect, but we are striving in that direction. And I think while Appleton still has work to do, as a lot of communities do, we are ahead of a lot of communities our size across the state and nation. And I think our police department deserves some credit for taking those steps.
Candidate Hartside?
I would agree with candidate Loebner that we are ahead of the curve in this regard, and I'm very proud to live in a city that has that to say for itself. I would start this process, well, add to this process because it's been started, with open and inclusive conversations. I think we should review all of our policies for anything that might unwittingly cause disparities and, of course, correct them. As long as we approach this with empathy and the acknowledgement of a wide variety of experiences that we all have, I think that we can be successful. One thing that I think that we should think about as a city is having a shared community diversity and inclusion coordinator rather than one that's just with Appleton. Our existing position for the community diversity and inclusion coordinator, that particular person, who's obviously no longer with us, it worked a lot with a lot of the county level and other municipalities near us. So if more of a Fox Cities sort of diversity and inclusion coordinator might help us to dial back as far as a little bit of budgetary spending, but also would increase the diversity and inclusion message throughout the Fox Cities. And I would look forward to seeing that occur.
Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim, we'll start the next question with you. Will you support increased, accessible, and affordable public transportation within our Appleton community and link that transportation to other communities?
Public transportation is like a library. It's a part of what makes a vibrant city, what makes a service city, a quality city. But I looked at the January reports from our current public transit system, and I see that ridership is dramatically down. Now, obviously, that's partially due to COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19, but it was also down previous to that. So it is a concern to me that the 2021 budget shows that we have about $810,000 in deficit budgeted. But that doesn't mean that it's not an important service that the city is subsidizing. So I think that that is the right thing to do, but I think we have to be careful about making sure that when we're establishing that this is an essential service to our city, that we do a lot of review of whether the routes are correct, whether the bus sizes are correct, and just continue to sort of hone those things within this service that we offer the community. And I think that that's the proper way to deal with it at this point.
Candidate Loebner.
Thank you. I was the longtime chairman of the Fox Cities Transit Commission. It was one of the first assignments I received when I started on council in 2013, and I've been there for 6 of my 8 years now on council. Valley Transit is a critical service to our community, but it's also a thing that people look for when they are looking for a place to move. Viable public transit is a vital asset when it comes to attracting people to our community. And so Valley Transit does a phenomenal job right now of being a service that can get you from anywhere to anywhere in the Fox Cities. The challenge is taking that next step and becoming a service that gets people where they want to go fast enough to become the way they want to get there. That's been a real challenge for us. When you look at how long it would take to get from, for example, most of District 13 to the mall, I could ride a bicycle there faster than I could get there on a Valley Transit bus. That's a real challenge for this community. It's going to require some challenging solutions, and it's going to require probably more expenditure than we've put in there. But Valley Transit has been a phenomenal partnership for the city of Appleton. With all of our partner municipalities in the county, for every dollar spent on Valley Transit, only 6 cents comes from the city of Appleton. It's mostly paid for by neighboring communities, by state and federal grants, and it's a vital service, both for employment and helping people get to healthcare here in our community. But it has an opportunity to be the reason people want to live here, and I hope we'll continue to invest in it.
Thank you. And we'll start with candidate Loebner for this next question. So have you viewed the climate resiliency videos and recommendations of the League of Women Voters of Appleton and also the city's climate task force? What actions should the city prioritize to deal with these concerns?
I have reviewed them both. And I recently reviewed the climate task force recommendations at some length. And one of the big things that I'm excited about is the opportunity where I think there is some low-hanging fruit to really reduce the city's carbon footprint when it comes to transportation. I am excited about possibilities. We're not quite there yet with the technology, but I'm excited about possibilities to do more environmentally friendly things with buses. Right now, it's not entirely feasible, but I'm hopeful that in the years ahead, we'll be able to have that conversation. And if we ever reach a point where we can get alternative fuel police cars, it will be a big time game changer for the fossil fuel footprint of our communities. Because police vehicles aren't just police vehicles here in the city. They frequently have a second life as vehicles that, for example, our assessor's office uses or that other city employees use as well. And so once we get to that point, there's an opportunity for us to really experience savings in fuel, but also to be dramatically better for our environment as a community. And so I'm grateful to both the League and to the Climate Change Task Force for the work they've put in to compile these recommendations. I know there's going to be a lot of conversation about them in the year ahead. And I'm really excited about the possibilities and some of the expertise that we've put together to come up with these recommendations.
Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim.
I too have reviewed the plan, 46 pages. It's very expansive and very ambitious, and I applaud that. But with ambition and expansive planning comes some expense. So I think we need to focus on the fact that everyone wants to preserve our planet, and that is undeniable. I think that taking excess governmental steps might not necessarily be wise. Rather, I would prefer that we use education and more bite-sized encouragement for our citizens and within our city departments. As was mentioned by candidate Loebner, we get more flies with honey than with vinegar. So I think encouraging folks to remember their carbon footprint and try to minimize it would be the way that this city would be effective in climate control. The last few pages of the document were most important to me, the education and community engagement pages. And they talked about the things that can be done within households. Rather than create a single position that was floated in this particular document, I would rather, like the diversity and inclusion coordinator, I'd like to see a Fox Cities wide climate coalition office that will help all of the Fox cities to minimize the negative climate impacts, sort of like the Resilient Cities Network that was mentioned there.
Okay, and we'll start with candidate Hartzheim. So a question of concern to the League regards voting. So early voting in Appleton is the 2 weeks before the week of the election day. So that starts March 23rd. It is only at the city clerk's office. And with a few adjustments of the regular working hours, expanding this would take additional funds, particularly for large elections. Would you favor expanding this? Candidate Hartzheim.
I perhaps would favor expanding it, but I would want to first have the data in front of me to know whether that expansion would increase participation or whether it would just increase costs with no added value. I think it would require some sort of study to determine whether this has been successful in other cities, in other municipalities. And maybe the answer is something different. Maybe it's more secure drop boxes rather than expanded hours. Maybe it's just better communication with our citizens to tell people what's available and when, to make sure that they're very clear on what is available already without expanding. But I have absolutely no problem with, once we come up with the fact that an expansion is required, then that's what we should do.
Candidate Loebner.
Thank you. Early voting is one of my favorite things that we do as a city. I have volunteered in the clerk's office several times for major elections to work early voting locations. In fact, if folks have voted early, odds are they've seen me there. I think I've put in hundreds of hours over the years helping out with early voting. There is an element to which, when we look to expand it, we are limited by state statute. I was very disappointed early in my tenure. The city used to have a satellite voting location on campus at Lawrence. It was tremendously convenient for students to come in and vote. It greatly increased voter participation on campus. That was eliminated by state statutes. It's a thing I'd love to bring back, but it would require action by the state to do so. I'm always open to ideas to get more people to vote. I think it's critical to our democracy that we encourage everyone to do so. And so I would be happy to look at opportunities to expand with the understanding that we are limited by state election laws. And they have been in the past both very restrictive and also very frequently changed, which has been a real challenge for voting officials and specifically for our clerk's office as we work to put together safe and effective elections.
Thank you. We'll start with candidate Loebner. Will you support obtaining formula block grant funds as lobbied for by the National League of Cities to build back better for this year, infrastructure, workforce, housing, and to reduce gun violence?
You know, anytime there is extra money available to build infrastructure, I think we need to do everything we can to make sure we are applying for those grants and meeting the needs for it. Infrastructure is one of the greatest challenges we face as a community. When I started on council, construction costs were low enough that we were largely able to pay cash as a city for street repairs, for example. The cost of street repairs has skyrocketed as the cost of concrete has gone up and as the cost of labor has gone up around the community. It is increasingly difficult for us to keep up with the road repairs that need to be done without having to borrow for it. And so as there are opportunities out there for us to find grant money, and I'm grateful to hear that there may be money available to consider infrastructure projects, because I think there's going to be a lot of communities out there, Appleton included, that as we come out of the pandemic and as we look to the years ahead, are going to have work to do and are going to be at risk of falling behind if we don't keep up with it, but also have some tough budget years ahead as we deal with the after effects of a pandemic. And so, yes, I would be in favor of applying for these grants and looking for this opportunity to work on infrastructure projects with them. I think it's the right thing to do for our community in terms of the infrastructure projects and also our community in terms of job creation. Those are two big goals of the city.
Candidate Hartzheim.
I too would support block grant funding for infrastructure, et cetera, as mentioned in the question. I think it's fixed funding that's carefully managed, and I believe that that's appropriate for us. I think it is a practical funding option that, as long as there isn't a blank check mentality, I think that that's something that we should pursue.
Okay, we'll start the next one with candidate Hartzheim. Local taxes for property owners have increased over 22% in the past 5 years, during which time the cost of living has increased only 8.7% and Social Security 8.1%. Appleton taxes, when combined with school taxes, comprise approximately 80% of our property taxes. What would you do to ease this trajectory?
I am very concerned for the fixed income homeowners in the city of Appleton. I see that our tax rates, our local tax rates are outpacing COLA by leaps and bounds, and that is very disconcerting to me. I think that our city needs to focus on the core competencies, the basic core functions of a city, and then balance and temper growth with fiscal responsibility. Especially in the post-COVID economy that we're approaching. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people have had their businesses closed. So we don't know what will be available for people to pay for property taxes, and you can't get blood from a turnip. So I am by no means advocating an austerity budget for the city, but I think that we need to stop and put a stop to the exponential growth of expense.
Candidate Loebner.
Thank you. I literally talked to the mayor about this earlier today. We are working on, and we'll be talking about in the months ahead, a plan to try to sustainably manage municipal debt in the years ahead. But I think it's worth noting that Appleton has been far ahead of the curve on this for a long time. There is a state mandated debt limit for communities. And there are communities here in the Fox Valley that are very near that threshold. Appleton, shortly after that limit was put in place, established an internal threshold that we would not exceed 20% of our legal limit. We have not approached it at any point in the last 2 decades until these last few years. Now, I will also note that during that time, while Appleton's municipal debt load has been very low, the Wisconsin Policy Forum released a report in January of this year that Wisconsin's state and local tax burden as compared to income as a whole is the lowest it has been at any point in the last 50 years. There's a narrative out there, and we hear it all the time as council, that Appleton's property taxes are out of control, or that our local taxes are out of control. That narrative just isn't based in reality. As a community, we have done a fantastic job going way back before my tenure of making sure that we are doing what we can responsibly, that we are limiting our debt, and the debt is the biggest thing that gets passed on in form of property tax raises. Now, we can't not spend forever, and we've had projects we've had to take on, Herb Pool, the Expo Center, and others.
Thank you,
Been
Candidate
very
Loebner.
responsible in this regard.
I'm going to follow up with the general obligation debt question. So the general obligation debt is now 20.3%, and this has been up, as you've mentioned, 100% in the past 5 years. So this is like 10 million added to this debt each of those last 5 years. How do you propose to keep this important measure of a city's financial health in check and moving again in the right direction? So I'll expand from what you were talking about earlier.
Well, we're in a healthy position right now, as noted by the fact that Moody's continues to give us a AA bond rating year over year. That is the second highest rating they give to municipalities. It's been at that rate or higher for all of my 8 years on council, and it had been there for a long time before that. But we are working to make sure that we do not exceed our debt threshold, both the internal threshold, which again is 5 times lower than the threshold set by the state. And so we are working because we do have projects to do. We have needs to talk about a new fire station as a community. We certainly have a need to build a new Appleton Public Library. And so we are going to strain these limits at times, but that is a bit of the challenge of continuing to meet some unmet needs that we have from the previous decade. There were years early in my tenure on council where municipalities could borrow for less than 1.5% interest rate, and we didn't borrow at all. And so we have unmet needs. We have work that needs to be done in the library. But again, I will note that the city of Appleton has done a fantastic job of doing this, and we've also paid off our debt early. Every year, the unspent dollars in our budget, by city policy, 75% of them go into debt relief. Going to paying off our debt early and putting us in position to lower that debt threshold. So year over year, this is a thing we've done very well as a community. I'm proud of it, both in my time as a finance committee chairman and now over the last year as chair. And it's a thing we'll continue to do in the years ahead to make sure that we are continuing to get the work we need to do done, but at the lowest possible impact to the taxpayers.
Thank you. Candidate Hartzheim.
Thank you. I highly disagree with candidate Loebner that we are in a healthy condition when 20% of all the tax dollars coming into the city are used to service debt. When the U.S. Venture project was on the budget, we were far exceeding the self limit of 20%. So I believe that we need to rein in spending. Again, I'm not advocating for an austerity budget, but we need to rein in spending, and I think we need to do a very good job of controlling the added expense of the library project. I think if we do a very good job of minding our P's and Q's in that regard, that we will remain as is and hopefully reduce that debt load as well.
So Candidate Hartzheim, we'll start with you for this question. If you want to reduce or cut spending by the city, what would you cut and by how much?
What would I cut and by how much? That's that's a good one. I believe that, first of all, we need to freeze our fee-based assessments where they stand and do a better job of managing the budget from there. We have to carefully look at all line items on the budget. And I believe I come from a place with being a small business owner and being a business manager as well, that will assist the city in doing that. I can't say it enough. I don't advocate an austerity budget, but we must get our costs under control as we move forward. We need to use rational thought paired with listening to our neighbors and our constituents and helping to prioritize needs. Again, I go back to we need to manage the core competencies of a city and do the best that we can at that. And then our wants will come after that. I think there's a shared vision to add value to the citizens of Appleton for the least amount of additional property taxes and without any increase in the fee assessments for city residents.
Candidate Loebner?
Thank you, Chair. This is where the rubber hits the road. Because every year as a city, we come together on a Saturday in November. It's called Budget Saturday. We sit down at 8 in the morning. We start with chapters of the budget individually. We go one by one through the budget, looking for opportunities to make changes, looking for places where we might be able to do better, looking for places where there might be something that isn't needed to be there. Routinely, year over year, we do not find opportunities to make major cuts. I think it's easy to say that we need to do better. I think it's much harder to find actual cases where the city of Appleton has unnecessary spending that we could cut. Eliminating fee increases is not going to help us curtail spending. And there's an awful lot of rational thinkers in that room. You might be surprised, and we're not finding an opportunity there either. So at the end of the day, yes, we would all love for property taxes to be lower. I don't enjoy paying mine either. But with that said, I think that we as a community have done a really great job of making sure that we are balancing meeting the needs and expectations of our residents with trying to keep our taxes as low as possible. As finance chair, that's a thing I take very seriously, but I took it seriously before that as well. And it's a thing I hope to work on again in the years ahead.
Thank you. Candidate Loebner, we'll start with you for this next question. To appropriately represent constituents as alderperson, a candidate must have strong work experience to fully understand the daily struggles our working class endures. Please share your real-life work experiences outside of politics you will use to formulate decisions in this role, and please be specific.
One of the great things I love about my situation right now is that I carry a variety of different roles day to day. And so every day is a little bit different for me. I come to the table as a person who has been long self-employed. I'm a freelance writer. I have several clients. And so as the pandemic has gone on, it's been a real challenge to manage their needs in conjunction with trying to make sure I'm continuing to work and generate income. But another place where I've generated a lot of experience over the last few years, I'm a substitute teacher for the Appleton School District. I've worked in 5 different elementary schools in a variety of roles over the last few years. During the 2018 to 2019 school year, I was the long-term sub at the library at Huntley Elementary. And so that gives me an opportunity to get to know a variety of different people, to work with them, and to really understand kind of their day-to-day needs. And so one of the great things about the mix of jobs that I have right now, including the city, is just the variety of people that I get to meet and work with and hear from. And I think that diversity of experience that I have in my recent work really pays off when we come to the table, because I do have experience working with a wide array of people.
Candidate Hartzheim?
Thank you. As I said in my introduction, I've worked since the 1990s to run businesses. I've owned my own business and operated it. It had at the time that I retired from that, it had multi-million dollars in sales nationwide or worldwide. I apologize. So I know what it means to manage the budget, to manage people, to talk to people, to communicate. Much like running a business, the city it should be run like a business, especially where you own your own business and the dollars are yours to spend. I promise that I will treat Appleton taxpayers' dollars like my own with that same respect. So I mentioned again, I had public service experience. I also have decades of business experience, human relations experience. Also was an internal and management accountant for as many years as I've been a business manager. And I feel that I have all of those things to offer to my neighbors who generally have that same sort of experience themselves.
Okay, and we'll start with candidate Hartzheim. What are your biggest policy priorities if elected?
Policy priorities. I have some big priorities if I'm elected, and they are to most clearly and closely represent my neighbors, and that includes fiscal responsibility. My other, it isn't necessarily policy related, but my other big priority as a common council member is to communicate and use two-way communication with my neighbors. If any Appletonian has a question, I hope to be able to be open to answer that for them or to find out who can answer that for them. And as I mentioned in my intro as well, my most important goal is to listen to my neighbors.
And Candidate Loebner?
Thank you. I think the biggest thing that we're going to have to deal with in the year ahead, and it's going to be a discussion that we have probably repeatedly, is how we manage getting back to normal as a community as we deal with the tail end of the COVID pandemic, or at least what we hope will be the tail end of the COVID pandemic. This is something that's going to come up both as a community, how we reopen, when can we start hosting events again, when can we do things like allow kids to enjoy our swimming pools during the summer again, but it's also a really big deal as an employer. How do we deal with making sure people are comfortable coming back to the workplace when they've been working from home for a while? How do we make sure our city services are uninterrupted, but also that our city employees are taken care of? And so that's going to be, I think, really the biggest issue that we deal with over the next year. And I think it's going to be something we're going to have a lot of conversations about. I had an in-depth conversation about this with the mayor just today. Additionally, I do think that we're going to have a lot of conversation the year ahead about the Appleton Public Library. It's a long overdue conversation. We've been trying to build a new library for 13 years now, since long before my time on council. I think it's important that we do this well. And so that's a top priority for me as well. And then, as chairman of the finance committee, trying to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible is a good word, because we have needs we need to meet and we have expectations we need to meet. We also need to do it responsibly. And so those are the three big things for me going forward.
Thank you. Candidate Loebner, we'll start with you, and we've got just 2 more questions here, so the end is in sight. What would you support to improve the quality of life in District 13?
I think, the quality of life here in District 13 right now is pretty high as it is. We have some really great parks here in the community. We've got some great developing neighborhoods up here as well. District 13 has grown a lot just in my time representing it, which has been really fun to watch. It's created some new challenges as well. We're going to have some work to do up here to turn an area that 20 years ago was pretty much nothing but farm fields into a vibrant part of a community. And some of that means things like street redesign. I know candidate Hartzheim and I live right down the road from French Road, which is going to be a street that's going to need a lot of work in the years ahead to transition from being a street that used to run between farm fields into a street that meets all the expectations of folks who live in an urban environment. And so, there's some work to do in the years ahead as it comes to infrastructure. And I would reach back to a conversation we had about transit. This is not a corner of the city that's really easy to get to places without getting in your car and going. I think we have an opportunity as a community to make sure we are doing more so that people can come and go from this neighborhood without needing to be one person, one car throughout their existence up here.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Hartzheim?
During my campaign, I've talked to many of my neighbors, and the primary thing that they tell me is that yes, the quality of life here is great, but what they want from a common council member to help increase their quality of life is to have someone who will listen to their needs and have the needs of the community and my neighbors met. So that is my priority in this regard. And then again, I come back to attending to the basic services of a quality city, providing those things to our neighbors and allowing them then to make life choices from there forward are the most important things that I hear my neighbors say about what they want from the common council to support their highest quality of life.
Okay. And so we'll finish up with Candidate Hartzheim and then Candidate Loebner on why should residents in District 13 vote for you?
I could be silly right now, but I'm not going to be silly. My background speaks for itself. I have business and public service experience. I am a methodical thinker, a strong communicator, and a problem solver. More importantly, I believe in the people of Appleton. They know what's best, what's good for themselves and their neighbors in this city. And I will work to honor that in all decisions in local government. I believe in the greatness of the city of Appleton as a growing city, which was founded with Midwestern values and common sense. And most importantly, I will listen to others to get a good pulse on what are the biggest concerns of Appletonians and how we can all work together to solve those problems without breaking the bank. So those are the reasons I would ask for my neighbor's vote on April 6th.
Thank you. Candidate Loebner?
Thank you. I hope that when folks look at my tenure on the Appleton Common Council, they will look at me as an older person who has done what I said I would do 8 years ago when I ran the first time. In December of 2012, when I decided to run for alderman for the first time, I went around the neighborhood, I went door to door, and I told people I was going to work to keep them informed about what was going on with the city so that they could participate in our decision-making process and the important decisions we had in the years ahead. Shortly after that, I launched my alderman blog, which I have since posted in 261 times. It shows up on our neighborhood next door page. It shows up on our Facebook pages. I have made it easier than ever to stay informed and get involved with local government. And I'm flattered that several of my colleagues have since decided to do the same in their districts. But I've been more than that over that time. I've been a staunch observer of our budget process and one of the people who has developed a reputation for doing things like sending in dozens of pages of questions about the budget after a thorough review. I've been very involved in public safety issues in our community as a longtime chair of the Safety and Licensing Committee. I've worked to improve traffic safety around Appleton North and around Huntley Elementary, the two public schools in our district. I'm somebody who has clearly demonstrated that I am experienced, respected, effective, and nonpartisan. And so I hope when people go to the ballot on April 6th, they will remember that I'm somebody who has done what I said I would do. I'm somebody who's worked really hard to be effective in my role. And I deserve 2 more years as an opportunity to continue to do it.
Thank you. And I just have a few closing remarks before we all disband here. I want to thank you, candidates, again, for being a part of this. This was very interesting, very informative, and in line with your mission to help communicate with your district. We do have some announcements. We have continued forums that are coming up here. So we have tomorrow and Thursday, we have 2 more forums, and then we have next week, we have 2 forums as well, one of which is for Calumet County Circuit Court Branch 2. So I want to remind you of some of the important dates that we are facing here. The online voter registration is open until Wednesday, March 17th. So you have a little over a week to do that online. Otherwise, after that date, you need to either go to your clerk's office to register or on election day. And I will remind you to bring both proof of residence and proof of ID. You can request your online absentee ballot at myvote.wi.gov, but it is suggested that you have that mailed in by March 23rd to make sure it's there in a timely fashion. In-person absentee voting starts on Monday, March 23rd and goes to April 2nd, but please check with your municipality to make sure you know what the times are that they are open, as they will adjust some of those times to be past their working hours. Then one more set of reminders. These questions are going to be sent to our candidates, and they're going to provide us with written responses of 150 words or less for each of those questions. And then those would be posted on our website, and you can see that the ones that are listed on this slide will be up there as we kind of roll these out as we go along. And the school board forum should be up by the end of this week, because I know that affects everybody in the district. So Also, I want to remind you that if you are in a situation that you are living alone and you need to have a witness for your absentee ballot, that just contact the league. We know what all the rules are, and we'll do this appropriately in a safe way to help you get a signature, a witness signature for your absentee ballot. If you want to check on anything, your registration, your polling location, in-person absentee ballot voting, request or track that absentee ballot, myvote.wi.gov is your main source. You can also get that information off of the City of Appleton website. And for nonpartisan voter information, vote411.org is your source. And with that, I have a ton of thank yous because there were just a whole bunch of people that were helping out to make this possible. Thank you to Julie, our timekeeper, to Jean, our president. I want to thank Brian. We have 4 tech people because we have a number of forums coming up yet. And so we need 4 people in training. So Dave and Barb and Ligia and Miriam. Also want to thank our backups, Brian and Shirley. So thank you very much. And don't forget to vote on April 6th. And thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you, folks. Have a good night.